We're live. Thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show, Dave. Very much appreciate it.
You're
Why
very
don't you,
welcome.
absolutely. Why don't you take a quick second to just tell folks a little bit about your career background and how'd you get into product marketing?
Oh, okay. I'll try to give you the shortest version I can. Educational background is computer science and mathematics. First started out in technical coding, and worked as a developer for software companies. My boss came to me one day and said, You're the product manager." So then I became a product manager, like, and had no idea. And I sort of had an idea what it was, but I really didn't. And so I did product management for a while, and then I transitioned over into product marketing along the way. Uh, I was in companies where product marketing wasn't like a distinct function in the company. So it was just marketing and product management. So we did a lot of product marketing anyway as product managers at that point in time. And then somewhere along the way, I was a sales engineer and got out in the field and hung out with sales teams and traveled all over the place. And then eventually, I just kind of settled into something I really loved, and that was, how do we take these products that we're responsible for in some degree and turn them into something that really makes the business work, right? It really generates revenue, retains customers, and that kind of thing. And so I wound up going to a company called Product Marketing for a while. They acquired a little startup I did, and in the product launch space. And I thought I'd be there for a few years. I wound up being there over 10 years.
Wow.
Wow, that dates me a little bit. And then more recently, I was a VP of product marketing at a big enterprise software company. And now I'm doing my BrainKraft thing, which I've had going in the background for a number of years.
Awesome. Well, why don't we dig into product marketing? Because it seems that product marketing, you sort of alluded to it before, where it wasn't like a defined role at some of the organizations that you worked at. And the more I dig into product marketing in the last couple of years, the more it's evident that it's sort of this role that is specific to the needs of the organization and the way that the organization is designed and so on. What's, from your perspective, the definition of product marketing?
All right, so let me start with adding to some of the confusion first before I answer the question. I held a job one time where my job title was product marketing manager, and I was a product manager by any definition, right? I worked with development, I prioritized the backlog, I built roadmaps. I mean, I did all that stuff just like I was a product manager, and at that time it was not that uncommon. It was, some people would be called product managers and they did product management. Some people would be product managers and they did product management, and it was kind of a weird time. No one knew what the hell they were supposed to be doing. Now, over that time, I've been able to see enough companies, literally hundreds, if not thousands of people. I was able to teach at Pragmatic Marketing, and it became very clear to me is, when you ask a lot of product marketers, so what's the role of product marketing? They go, oh, well, it's to build sales tools and it's to do this and it's to do that. And I go, well, those are the things you do. What is your purpose? Like, what's your mission? And I just narrowed it down to something simple that everyone should be able to remember. And that is, product marketing is all about nurturing a product to its fullest potential. Right. And there's a lot going on in what I just said, because some of it is acquiring customers for growth. Some of it is retaining customers. Some is growing existing customers by cross selling and upselling. And some of it is just flat out stealing customers away from your competitors. But if you think about the big four objectives in a product launch or product growth, anything around product marketing, it's win, keep, grow, steal. That's all you need to remember. Everything you do should be around winning new customers, and actually steal is just you know, a fun version of a win. So winning new customers, keeping the ones you win, and growing the ones you keep. That's it. Write that down, put it on your wall. That's all you need to know.
Awesome. Awesome. Are there any particular traits that top product marketers in your experience possess? And, you know, maybe there's some roles that make, prior roles that make great product marketers. My co-founder, he was a salesperson, right? For
Hmm.
many years he ran a sales development team as well. And so when he went on to the other side to be a product marketer, it felt like, from his experience and what he's communicated to me, is that he could like relate a little more to the sales team and their needs,
Oh
and
yeah.
also some of the things that were kind of bothering him on the other side. Now he started to understand those things. Um, so yeah, and any sort of top traits.
Yeah. Oh no, that's a great question. So much like your co-founder, I spent time in the field as a sales engineer. So I did have that understanding of going out in the field and dealing with the tools that they were given and the resources they lacked, or the resources they had too much of and they didn't use. And it gave you a different perspective of how the whole engine works in the organization. So I had that perspective of the engine of building software, and I had the perspective of how we sell software, and then in the middle is the glue that ties that all together, which is how do we take those stuff to market and actually be successful. Now, the traits that I look for are number one, um, curiosity. I mean, an annoying sense of being curious, of asking why and looking for better ways of doing things. And then looking at the status quo and saying, why do we do that? Is there a better way? So curiosity is really important, whether you're a product marketer or a product manager for that matter. Another thing is, I believe it's important to be a good diplomat. Now, I don't mean like you blow smoke up everybody's what, but it's the ability to move around the organization and be comfortable with dealing with power, being comfortable sitting down with sales reps and the sales team and being able to go toe to toe with them, but actually be a partner with them. And I think my personal experience of being in the field as an SE prepared me for that in ways I didn't realize were important until much later. Because it's very comfortable for me to sit down with salespeople. I understand what they're going through. I sat in through sales trainings, virtually everyone you can um, r- r- you know list off. I probably was in them at some point in time, and so I get the understanding of the issues, the challenges, and the pain. You gotta put all the bluster aside about sales reps and they're king of the hill and all that kind of good stuff, but down deep down inside, they've got anxieties and concerns, and that they feel are not being addressed. But at the same time, you can't just do everything they ask you to do. So that's where the diplomacy comes in place. So you can't build yet another thing that they want now that adds to the what I call the document cemetery, where all the stuff goes to die. So it goes in this pool of stuff for salespeople. And now we have six of them, eight of them, 10 of them, and all basically the same things. The other thing about a good product marketer is, one side of them is dealing with the sales team, another side of them is dealing with the corporate marketing side of the house, and then they've got rules and guidelines and brand stuff, and you can't do this and you can't do that and you can do this, and then they also have to deal with product managers. And so I guess that's three sides, it's triangle. So now when it comes to dealing with product management, don't you can't this is where your curiosity kicks in. You can't just take at face value what product managers tell you is the coolest thing. You got to let them just kind of spill it all out. And then you ingest all that information and look for where the sweet spots are in a new product, in a new release. When you're a product manager on a product for a very, very long time, it seems like all you're doing is incremental stuff, and everything incremental is just, well, incremental. But a good product marketer can look at that and go, that's not just incremental, that's close to groundbreaking, and we need to really pump that up. So I gave you a very long-winded answer, but it's basically curious, good diplomat, and being able to be empathetic to the audiences you have to deal with, which is product management, sales, and corporate marketing.
Now, speaking of sales and being diplomatic, one of the things that we've heard over the last several months is we've been talking to a lot of product marketers about some of their sort of workflows and pain points within those workflows is like really this misalignment with sales that oftentimes happens. And it's funny because we've been talking about sales and marketing alignment since I've been in the industry, and
Hmm.
that's about 20
It
22 years
never
or so.
goes away.
It never goes away, and I'm thinking that there's no software on this planet that will help with that because it's more of like a human
Yeah.
thing. It's
Yeah. It's a human thing, and it's also I think some of it can be, blame is not the right word, but some of it could be put at the foot of management. I mean, there's a long history. We've all experienced it where, especially on the sales side, hitting your quota is a great way of overcoming any other shortcomings that you might have had in the organization, anybody you've angered, or any steps you've taken that are outside of policy. And so these things have been around for a very long time. Not all companies do that. Some are very much more stringent about their sales. But I think that I'm gonna throw something out there that may not a lot of people may not like, but I'm going to say it anyway because everyone needs to hear it. And that is, we have too many people who are product marketers who don't know anything about the product or the market, right? So, your job in my world, so if you were on my team, your job is to be, maybe you're not today, but I want you to strive to be the experts on the markets you serve. What problems are we solving? Why is it a problem? How painful is it? Who are the people experiencing that problem? Why should they buy from us? So, a lot of frustration in the product marketing side stems from basically the fact that there are a number of PMMs who they just create deliverables, and they don't quite understand how they're going to be used, but they say, well, sales needs a sales presentation, and I built a sales presentation. So, you guys go shut up and do your thing and leave me alone because I
Mhm.
got your sales presentation. And that's unfair. What you should be is the salespeople should be coming to the product marketing managers going, I need your help. You guys are the experts at how to deal with this. I'm stuck. Can you help me? And so maybe that's a little uncomfortable for some of your listeners to hear, but it's true. So if I were going to solve that problem, my first thing would be to say, "Hey, Jorge, why don't you go out on a couple of sales calls? I'm not asking you to be a salesperson. I'm asking you to be a sponge. Listen, right? Sit in on the calls. Go to some industry events where you can just hang out, not just be in the booth, but go hang out and talk to people. Get in some groups, right? Immerse yourself in the industry and understand what the problems are and be able to represent those problems in a way that nobody else can represent inside your company."
Awesome. The tips you provided so fundamental, yet we don't we don't do
No.
them. I remember when I was, I've been in sales for most of my career, the last couple of years on the marketing side, and even as a founder, always sort of held that sales role. And what I realized was that most sales organizations at tech companies, which is what I've spent my adult
Mhm.
life in, didn't really get it. Like they didn't get those fundamentals. And what was funny was I actually, when I was in graduate school, sold books and those big reference books, the door to door.
Mhm.
And what we used to do was we'd call it following, or some folks call it shadowing. The way that you actually got onboarded to that organization was by doing what you said, sitting in the room. Let's say, we would be selling on porches um and living rooms, but that's how you got to know uh the product, and that's you were
Mhm.
required to follow the salesperson on your team, someone that you were assigned to, for days. And in
Right.
fact, when salespeople were doing poorly, what did they do? Instead of, like, people didn't get fired. Well, it was also like independent contracting, right? So it was a
Right.
different model. So it was massively de-risked on the organization side, but I thought that this fundamental, which was when certain salespeople were struggling, what you did was not go and get managed by a manager, right? Like
Mhm.
exclusively, but you would then stop on your routes and then follow a top producing salesperson
Right,
to get
right.
back
Go
in the rhythm.
Yeah, it would be like in sports, right? If you're a pitcher and you're having trouble, what do? You go back to basics. You work with one of the other pitchers or pitching coaches, or you go back to the core and you go, okay, maybe I developed some bad habits, or maybe I'm doing something I don't even realize I'm doing, that and it's preventing me from being successful. I just, need to hit reset. What better than to hang out with somebody who's already batting, 400? So let me go hang out with him or her.
Absolutely. And I think that this is where also the qualitative, getting your head back in the game component is
Hmm.
also a factor, right? Like, so often, especially I think in corporate, environments, we forget about the human component. We forget that for someone to perform well, right? uh their head needs to be in the ball game, right? They need to be emotionally, in a good place, those sort of things.
Engaged. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the challenges, I think, with remote work. Now, I'm a big fan of remote work,
Hmm.
absolutely, but I do think it introduces, that's another topic for another day, but I do think that it introduces a dynamic that has to be addressed and
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
managed, and
Yeah.
managers, leadership has to take these things into account, and the human component is much more important. Speaking of challenges, I know we sort of alluded to a couple, like you mentioned, like PMMs not knowing their product or the market well for various reasons. But what would you say if you had to think about one top challenge that PMMs consistently face in your experience? What would you say is that challenge?
I think the biggest challenge is that they are blocked from access to the market. They you hear this a lot. Well, I'm working with sales and I'm trying to get customer referrals and case studies and blah blah blah, and they won't let me talk to their customers. Now, that's I completely understand, and please jump in from a sales perspective on this. I tried to tell my teams and the companies I work with, I go, it's not that they don't like you. That has nothing to do with it. It has to do with they only have so many hours in the day, and they only have so many accounts that they can deal with in their territory, and they got a quota to hit. And one wrong question in a meeting with one of their customers could set off a cascade of activity for a sales rep that keeps them away from what we hired them to do, which is to sell stuff. And it's easier just to say, no, talk to me, than it is for them to take the risk. Like I was in a meeting once, in a sales call once, and I wasn't the fly on the wall. I was part of the team, and we had a more junior product manager in there, and the sales rep had closed a deal on a product. And the product manager made the mistake of saying something to the effect, "Wow, that's so interesting. If that's your problem, you're not going to wait until you see the next release." Right. And so you could see the glances that went from the buyer to the rep, like within nanoseconds, of saying, why are we in the middle of an implementation when we could have just waited a couple months and got the new thing? So then they had to unwind all that. And the only reason I tell you that is it's a concrete example of what reps, are worried about.
Absolutely. The other thing that I would add is I think it's important that management and leadership also set the tone and are communicating what the value is. Because if the salesperson is working with a PMM, or sometimes there's these customer marketing roles that have popped up the last couple of years,
Hmm.
uh, you know, and they are not aware of the value, or the PMM is just looking like they're checking a box, and it's
Hmm.
not something, it's just like, oh, I got to do this thing, I got to get this case study, and it's not a celebration of the success of the customer. It's not something that seems like, at least in the way that it's put together or communicated to the salesperson. And then
Right.
oftentimes the salesperson might have had a bad experience in the past with a PMM, maybe that
Oh, yeah.
particular PMM, right? So doing that well, if you're going to put a case study, for example, together, or like podcasts and these sort of things, there's new methods of doing things that are also less um, less of a lift for the customer on their side. If it's positioned in a way where it's celebrating and there's value and there's that extra mile that the PMM is thinking about in terms of how I'm communicating to these both stakeholders, right? Internally to sales, and then or CS, could be as
Hmm.
well, and the customer. Then I think that that'll help also with that alignment and get better results overall, right?
It's yeah, you hit on two things. One is there needs to be a leadership level acknowledgement that the customers belong to the company, not to the sales rep. That's number one. Number two is that there's an acknowledgement of the rep, not the reps, but the product marketing managers need to take the initiative to work, no matter how difficult it is, and no matter how many times they have to run against the wall until they get it right, of working with some reps to get access to customers. And and you got to be creative. Maybe you just won't. The goal is to build trust. If you can build trust with the sales team, they will believe you when you tell them something. Like, here's why we can't do that. And they'll go, okay. Because remember, sales reps have to hear no 7 times, right?
Mhm.
So they ask you for a thing and you go no. And then they're going to ask you 6 more times. And each time they ask you, the emotional level goes up. And it's usually because they feel they need something that they're lacking to help them close one deal that they're working on. And you're the product marketing manager and you're thinking, I've got to be responsible for all of the deals in the entire market. And I can't create custom collateral for every rep. But that all gets back to, you see, if you had a better understanding of the market and you had trust built with key members of the sales team, particularly the good ones, right? There's that 10% rule. 10% of the reps are like, leave me alone, I'll figure it out. But it's the other 90% you have to help. The 10 will figure it out. I mean, they just drop into any company and boom, They're killing it. But it's the 90 that need your help. But trust and access to the market. And if you can't get access to the market, win loss is a perfect example. Doing win loss interviews. You can't talk to my salespeople about, or my customers about that. Just ask the salespeople why they lost the deal. Well, we know the answer to that. It's not the right answer, but it's going to be a filtered answer.
Yeah. Well, I know we're coming up on time here again.
Yeah.
Dave, thank you so much. Real quick, any particular tools that you're loving? And then let's wrap up with anything you can share about your program, the
Yeah.
BrainKraft product launch
Uh,
system.
I'd be delighted to. Tools that are showing up for me. Well, definitely Chat GPT. I've been doing some experimentation there. And while it's not perfect, it's doing there are cases where the context isn't there, right? It's like missing, the edges are a little rough, but holy cow, I was able to crank out. I thought I did an experiment. There's a blog post that I have on my blog. Did an experiment. I said, I wonder if I could use Chat GPT to build a buyer persona. And how good could it possibly be? It's got to be terrible. I was actually impressed with how well, because you can keep refining it by asking questions and refining and refining and refining. And then in the end, I said, give me a list of citations. And it spewed all of the resources that it used to build that persona. Was it perfect? No. But for my product marketing friends out there, you guys have terrible buyer personas. Admit it. They all suck. I don't care how good you think they are. They were probably created 10 years ago and hadn't been updated. The hardest part anybody has is getting started. So ChatGPT is a great way to at least get started, and then you can refine it over time. You can add on to it. I'm a really big fan of Kanban boards. So I mean, I've got Kanban boards for everything. I got Kanbans for my chores around the house, and this is an area that product marketing teams are not making good use of. They get all embroiled in this project management tool and that project management tool, and we're going to use that one, and then this group's going to use the other one, and they all don't talk to each other. It's like, pick the lowest common denominator that works. And since we work with a lot of different clients, the lowest common denominator is a Kanban board. At a bare minimum, I could take a wall and put post-it notes on it. That, you know, and if they say, well, "What's a Kanban board?" I go, "Have you ever watched the HBO show Silicon Valley?" Yes, I loved that show. Remember when the developers would turn around in their chair and they would grab a post-it note off the glass thingy? Yeah, okay, that's a Kanban board. So, oh, but it's a super easy way. Other tools. I mean, I use a lot of different tools. You're probably going to think I'm a little whacked out here, but my favorite office tools are not from Microsoft. And they're not from Google. I use the iWork suite and love it. I'm a huge fan of Keynote and Pages. So I don't use many spreadsheets, so numbers is more than adequate. But they create beautiful presentations and beautiful documents. But other than that, I mean, there's a gazillion of everything else. Whatever you want, you know. There's 100 sales enablement tools. There's 100 CRM tools. Pick one. Just pick one and standardize it throughout the organization, please. Don't pick 5 of them.
Awesome. Well, why don't we wrap up with anything you could share around your BrainKraft product launch system?
Oh yeah. Be happy to. Yeah. So a lot of my career, I found myself in situations where I was leading up product launches for companies. I did quite a few of them. And then in my role at Pragmatic Marketing, they acquired my launch class, which then was taught to thousands of people, still being taught to thousands of people. And uh, what I've done is I've revised all of that and I brought it all up to date. It's now 2023 worthy. and I'm getting ready to launch a new version of all of it, and I've further systematized it, and that's why I'm calling it the BrainKraft product launch system, because it is a scalable system with canvases and worksheets and methods, um, and a framework with flow that helps small companies up to large companies, to standardize on how they launch, but not launch based on outputs and what they produce, but launches based on affecting business outcomes. And that's a key difference. We're not focusing on checklists where you go, oh, well, sales is going to need these 18 things and accounting is going to need these 17 things. You just say, here's a way to think through that, figure out what sales needs and accounting needs and so forth, and develop a strategy that produces win, keep, grow, steal results.
Awesome. Dave, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show today. If
You're very welcome.
folks, absolutely, if folks want to follow you on social media or getting in
Yeah.
touch with you, what are the best channels or URLs to reach you?
Okay. LinkedIn is David Keith Daniels. David Keith Daniels. So /in/David Keith Daniels. You can go to braincraft.com, or you can follow me on Twitter, which is Dave Daniels 205. So I live in Birmingham, Alabama. That's the area code. It's easy to remember. Dave Daniels 205.
Awesome. Well, you're around the corner. I'm in Florida. Uh,
Oh, where?
yeah. Well, I'm all the way down in Miami, but
Ah, yeah,
I went to school in Tallahassee, and
yeah.
you know, and so I wasn't too far from Alabama. Went
Okay.
to
Well,
undergrad and grad school.
Tallahassee is sort of lower Alabama anyway, right? So
Yeah, absolutely. Florida is an interesting place in that,
it is.
the Panhandle has this very specific, culture. Central
South
Florida,
Florida,
South
yeah,
Florida,
yeah.
South Florida is more like New York meets like Sao Paulo, Brazil,
Yeah,
or
yeah,
something.
yeah, right.
You
Yeah,
know, awesome. Well, Dave, have a wonderful afternoon, and thank you so much.
you bet. You're very welcome.